as I recall, we got down to about verse 24 in chapter 30.
24. I thought we got to 27.
I
had the next page marked.
Well,
24.
we I introduced what we're going to study tonight with verse 25 and 26, but really didn't get into it. I gave you a preview of
I'm always jumping ahead.
of the next episode.
The sneak
Alright.
peek.
What's that?
The sneak peek.
Yeah. All right, chapter 30, verse 25 says, Now it came about when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, Send me away that I may go to my own place and to my own country. Now, also, notice how Jacob framed this request. The family is all from Haran, but notice that even though Jacob by this point has lived here for 14 years, he doesn't consider Haran his country anymore. He is from or grew up in southern Canaan, and he's requesting that Laban cut him loose that he can go back there.
His mother is still back there, right?
And his parents are still back there. It says, Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and let me depart. For you yourself know my service, which I have tendered you. Now, or rendered you. So basically, Jacob is reminding Laban at this point, I paid my debt. I've been here for 14 years, and I want to leave. But now, Laban, at this point, bargains for him to hang around a little bit longer. And Jacob actually agrees to it. And in fact, we'll see that he stays for another 6 years. But in this 6-year period, we'll see that Jacob goes from being just basically a guy with 12 kids and 4 wives, and probably barely getting by, to he leaves there filthy rich. Now notice, before we get into this, I just want to kind of frame this. Abraham was, in fact, rich to begin with. But everywhere he went, even when he wasn't entirely honest with what was going on, for example, when he lied about his wife, he kept just getting richer and richer. Isaac, everywhere he went, God just kept adding more to him. And what we're going to see here is that Jacob, now the recipient of God's blessings in the next generation, essentially has come to Laban 14 years previously with nothing but the clothes on his back and whatever he might have been carrying. And God does the same thing with him. Now we're going to see over the next couple of days that Jacob is apparently, even though at this point he has come to know God, is extremely superstitious. And the methods by which he goes about trying to get rich, God does bless, but I think it's more of a situation where God does it in spite of Jacob and not because of what we're going to see is the ridiculous method that Jacob uses to enrich himself.
Before you go on, I got a question about how he phrases his request.
Mm-hmm.
He says, send me away. He doesn't say, let me leave. He doesn't say, allow me to go. He says, send me away.
Yeah.
What does he mean by that?
Well,
Was that just a common Hebrew way of making that kind of request?
yeah. He basically is saying he doesn't want to just up and leave. He
Since
wants
I'm
to
serving
go.
you as my master here.
He wants to go with Laban's blessing.
Okay.
But Laban doesn't want to do it. All right, verse 27, it says, But Laban said to him, If now it pleases you, stay with me. I have divined that the Lord has blessed me on your account. Now, just about every translation of the Bible that I looked at, in fact, had the word divined in here. I've divined that the Lord has blessed me. Now, if that is in fact the correct interpretation of this, and I'll explain why there could be another possibility here in a moment, that tells us that Laban is in fact not quite all there as far as his faith in God, that he's using pagan methods to determine what he thinks is God's will. Because it says he divined that God, has determined this, or God has blessed him. But nobody really knows for sure about what method he might have used, whether he's casting lots or using some pagan superstition. We're just not told. But yes, ma'am.
King James Version has a completely different take on that. It says, "For I have learned by experience."
All right, that's what the next thing I was about to get to. I'm fixing to answer your question right now. The only other possibility, which Karen just pointed out. Now, as a quickie reminder in Hebrew, written Hebrew is missing what? Vowels. The word that in several of the modern translations all say divine has exactly the same Hebrew lettering as a word that, as Karen just pointed out, and the King James translates it this way, means that you've discerned something. Or, and as Karen mentioned, the King James translates it, I've learned this. Same Hebrew consonants, but depending upon which vowels you add to it, one word says divine, the other word says discerned or learned. And it's a translator's choice as to which one it was. Now, looking at Laban for the kind of man that he was, we're left with a question at this point. Did Laban discern or learn that God had blessed him because of Jacob? Or do you think that he possibly did some, engaged in some pagan superstition that would have pointed at Jacob as being the reason behind it?
The dictionary Bible you gave me
Uh-huh.
has the version of it with the vowels that give it the meaning of actually divining. It's nakos is the word.
Uh-huh.
A verb meaning to practice divination, to observe omens. And it goes on to say, in other usages, Laban used divination to confirm that Jacob was a blessing to him. So it even references Laban in this definition.
Uh-huh.
So at least this Bible is taking the writers of this Bible are
Yeah.
taking the position that it's definitely divination.
But again, if you change the vowel points, same consonants, but use different vowels, then the word would be what Karen mentioned, that he learned or discerned it.
I'm not seeing that version of the word.
That's because the Bible that you're looking at there, the translators of that version of the Bible believed it meant
the divination.
divination. And see, that's part of the problem with Hebrew, is we can look at modern Hebrew and not be quite so ambiguous, because modern Hebrew includes vowel points and what have you. But ancient Hebrew didn't. And there's some words that could go either way. So that's the reason, Karen, that yours says one thing, others says something else. Identical word in Hebrew, but it just depends on how you pronounce the word as to what it might be. Now, the question we're left with is, knowing what we know about Laban's character, and again, this is a guess on our part as translators, what do you think it would be? Did Laban learn it, or did he divine it?
The only way he could have learned it is if God revealed it to him. And was Laban such a godly man that God would reveal something like that
Well,
to
from
him?
what we've already seen of Laban's character, he was anything but godly.
Yes, so that's where I'm going with this. I think
Uh-huh.
I tend to think it would be the divination.
Mm-hmm.
I think you might have learned it because he's
Well-
saying he's getting blessed because he's. Well, the
And I have a feeling what I'm about to tell you is probably what Bruce is about to point out. Go ahead.
I agree with Lou over there. I think he's seen Jacob getting blessed. And he just figures out this guy's got something, this guy is really in a position that God honors him and is increasing his wealth.
Well, there is one other possibility that would lean the scale of interpretation toward the divining. When, again, we're talking 6 years later, but when they did finally leave, what did Rachel steal from him?
The household idols.
The household idols. If he'd have been a really godly man, would he have had household idols? No, he wouldn't.
I'm thinking he still thinks God, but this is Jacob's God. I don't think
Yeah.
he's really identifying to
He
himself.
he knows this, as you just said, he knows this God.
Yeah.
And in fact, from his own ancestors, when they lived in Haran, he wouldn't have been born yet, but he would have learned from his father and his grandfather who the true God was. But again, what happens when, one generation doesn't do a good job of discipling the next one? We very quickly get into, paganism, or our faith falters.
And they're living amongst a bunch of neighbors who are all pagans,
And they're
teaching them about other so-called gods.
Absolutely, they're living amongst pagans. So, did he know who Yahweh was? Yes, he did. But did he believe,
and believing in the others
or
too?
did he worship Yahweh? Probably not. And that's the problem. Because again, we know that he had a house full of idols that he kept in his tent, from what we were told later. But anyway, so that's the reason there is a difference depending upon which version of the Bible you're looking at. That's the reason there is a difference in the wording there. All right. I've divined or discerned that the Lord has blessed me on your account. And he continued, name me your wages, and I will give it. But he said to him, and he, being Jacob, said to Laban, you yourself know how I have served you, and how your cattle have fared with me. In other words, Jacob's bragging about the fact that he's been a good herdsman. That his expertise in animal husbandry has apparently enriched Laban at this point. It says, for you had little before I came, and it has increased to a multitude. And the Lord has blessed you wherever I turn. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also? So, Jacob at this point is even telling him, said, everything that I've done has gone into your pocket. It's time for me to make a living for myself, which is why I want to leave. So he said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this one thing for me, I will again pasture and keep your flock. So now, consider this. Jacob has basically told him, said, I don't want anything of yours. Now, first off, where have we heard that before? There's actually a precedent for this.
Abraham.
There you go. When Abraham came back from the battle, and the king of Sodom came out and said, well,
Here's the spoils.
yeah. And Abraham said, I don't want any of this stuff. Otherwise, you'll brag that you made me rich. You keep it all. Just let the men who were with me have their share, but I'm taking nothing. Exactly what Jacob is telling him. I don't want anything of yours. However, I'll stay and serve you a little while longer. Now, do you think at this point he's gotten Laban's attention? Now that he says, well, I'll stay if. Now we'll see what the if is. What he's going to bargain with Laban about. It says, I'll kin pasture and keep your flock. let me pass through your entire flock today, removing from there every speckled and spotted sheep, and every black one among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and such shall be my wages. So my honesty will answer for me later, when you come concerning my wages. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, will be considered stolen. So now, basically, Jacob is Jacob is striking a bargain with him. We'll go through the flock right now, today. Everyone that is multicolored, I'll claim that one. All the solid ones, all the solid white ones, which apparently at this point were the majority of the sheep and the flock. He said, those are yours. If later on you find any solid white ones in my possession, you can claim that I stole them. Now, he said, we're going to do this today. But now here's the key. Laban beats him to the punch. Because Laban thinks he's going to be sneaky about this. Verse 33 says, so my honesty will answer for me later, when you come concerning my wages. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, will be considered stolen. And Laban said, good, let it be according to your word. So he removed on that day. Now, when it says he removed, it's not talking about Jacob. Laban did it. Laban beat him to it, and I will see why. We'll know this in a minute. He removed on that day the striped and spotted male goats, and all the speckled and spotted female goats, every one with white in it, and all the black ones among the sheep, and gave them into the care of his sons. Now again, as you read through this, it sounds like it's talking about Jacob. Except we know this can't be Jacob's sons, because at this point, the oldest of Jacob's sons would be how old? Not even yet. Because he didn't get to marry Leah until he'd been there 7 years. If she got pregnant right off the bat, that's a year later, his oldest son would only be 7 years old at this point. We're not talking about Jacob's sons here. This is Laban that's doing this.
And the next verse clarifies it.
Yeah, and the next verse makes it clear. And he put a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob. And Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. What's Laban think he's trying to pull here?
Basically move all this, what he was going to get, and move it away. So
yeah, he's taken all of what he just agreed would be Jacob's, and took him a 3 days journey at this point, on foot, moving a flock, probably about anywhere from 10 to 15 miles away.
So that when Jacob goes through the flock, there won't be anything
There
for him
won't
to take.
be any. So not a one of them.
But Jacob's got a cheat of his own he's working on here.
Or at least he thinks he does. And as we read through this, you can tell that there is no other explanation than God blessed Jacob, because the trick that Jacob pulls, we read through this today knowing what we know about DNA and animal husbandry, and we look at it and go, how can anybody be that dumb? But they thought it worked back then.
But it also shows that Laban never fell far from the tree. I mean, Jacob never fell far from that tree that Laban's the root, the branch of.
They're trying to outdo each other. It's like two thieves shaking hands and smiling at each other, and both of them have got, set of loaded dice in their pocket. Would love to have seen the two of those sitting around a poker table trying to out-cheat each other. All right, so he put a distance 3 days journey, which again, back then, 10, maybe 15 miles total. So between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. So Laban takes off with the flocks that now he's already agreed would belong to Jacob, and left the flock behind with his sons, which again tells us that Laban did have sons at this point, but we really don't know how many. Then Jacob took, now here's the good part, verse 37 tells us about the little trick that Jacob thinks he's going to use here. But we read through this, and if you're wondering, okay, how did this work? It didn't. That's just the superstition of people who knew absolutely nothing about breeding animals or about, genetics. This is just nothing but pure superstition from 2,600 years ago. In fact, at this point, probably about 3,000 years ago, I should say. Absolutely ridiculous what he does. Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar and almond and plane trees and peeled white stripes in them, exposing the white which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had peeled in front of the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink. And they mated when they came to drink. Well, why would the flocks be? Why then? It says they mated when they came to drink. Why would that be the time that the flocks would be breeding?
There's a lot of mating going on after drinking at the bar.
Well, yeah. Well, when he's got them out in the field grazing, he's probably keeping the males and the females separated. But when you bring them there to the watering trough, which we know is a well with a big rock on it, well, what happens? What do we all already saw from the beginning of this story? What do they do at the well?
Herd together.
They bring the whole herd together. So if they've had the ewes on one side and the rams over here in a different field, well, now he brings them together. Well, then sheep do what sheep are going to do. But now at this point, there where the breeding is going on, he's got these little sticks that he's peeled stripes in them, because in his mind, this is apparently some pagan trick that who knows where he learned this. I mean, again, we have no idea, but it was just some pagan practice that he's learned. My guess, where else would he probably have learned a pagan practice of this sort?
From Laban.
Probably from Laban. Probably one of these things he's picked up from
Or
Laban
Laban's
himself.
neighbors, from living there for 14 years.
Or the neighbors that he's lived with for 14 years, absolutely. But some pagan practice that we know has nothing to do with genetics, but he don't know that. He thinks that this is going to be some trick that's going to work.
But God made it work.
Yeah. Said, verse 39, so the flocks mated by the rods, and the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. So we've got now the striped, speckled, and spotted sheep are all a 3 days journey away in a separate flock now, because Laban's took them all off and hidden them. And so we've got solid color sheep and goats, which legally by the agreement all belong to Laban. And now look what they're all producing. Multicolored lambs.
Those recessive genes are combining.
Those recessive genes are combining. Absolutely. So now they're all producing the very thing that, so if they're all producing speckled and spotted sheep, every single lamb that they're producing, they now, according to the agreement, they all belong to Jacob. And Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban, and he put his own herds apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. So now what he's done is he's taken all the ones that have produced these speckled sheep, separated them out, took the solid colored ones that now legally belong to Laban, separate them out. So now what do you got going on? The speckled are mating with the speckled. which is going to produce what?
More speckles.
More speckles. Now, by the way, notice that in this, Moses, as he's telling this story, does not give us a timeline. But the fact that they have already begun producing lambs, what does that tell us?
It's been a few months.
It's been a few months. He's telescoping this story together in just a few verses of something that clearly is happening over several months. And in fact, we see as we continue on, it's going to be a total of 6 years. All right, verse 41. Moreover, it came about whenever the stronger of the flock were mating, that Jacob would place the rods in the side of the flock in the gutters, so that they might mate by the rods. But when the flock was feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler ones were Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Now, once again, what does these little sticks, these half-peeled sticks, have to do with anything? Nothing. This amuses you, doesn't it?
It does. What amuses me that God actually facilitated him and made it happen. That's what amuses me. I mean, you're right. I mean, the very fact that God would bless him in this action is just hilarious to me. I mean, God's going to get his end, no matter what it takes to make it happen. You know,
What was that, Larry?
Like the term my dad used to say, we used to raise rabbits. More rabbits you can shake a stick at.
I don't think he's shaking his sticks at him. They're getting the same result.
Yeah.
So the man became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. Now notice here, in one verse, he says he's got servants, camels, donkeys, flocks. Clearly, this didn't happen over just a few months' time. Moses has just basically telescoped in 6 years' worth of prosperity into one verse. But now we get to the interesting part.
So this established the standards of animal husbandry forevermore, right?
Well,
I just can't get over it.
I think if anything, the lesson in all of this is not only did they not know anything about real animal husbandry and genetics, but in spite of our stupidity, if God wants to bless you, God's going to bless you. Laban did not learn this from God. Laban learned this, not Laban, I meant Jacob. Jacob didn't learn this from God. He probably, as we mentioned earlier, either picked it up from Laban and his family or from some of the locals in the area. So he's being spiritually contaminated by his exposure to these people. But in spite of that, God's blessing him anyway. It's like, God does not bless us because
we deserve it.
Merely because we deserve it. It's like God blesses us in spite of ourselves. It says a lot about, God's going to bless who he chooses, and that's just the way it is. We just have to pray that God, not that we haven't been chosen, but I'm just saying generic, we, humanity, have to pray that God chooses to bless us, because we certainly don't get it because of our intelligence or because we deserve it. If anything, if God had blessed Jacob based upon his obedience and his adherence to what we would consider orthodox theology, Jacob wouldn't have had a dog's chance here. But God blessed him in spite of himself. And the whole time in these few verses that clearly cover possibly, at least several months and possibly a few years here, notice that Laban, once he leaves town, is not mentioned again. I don't wonder how long did Laban stay out of town with the flock that he absconded with?
Couldn't bring them back. Because,
No.
yeah, because then Jacob would have seen what he had ran away with, and
Mhm.
then, wait a minute, those are mine. You know, he had to have kept them separate for all that.
But
time.
the other thing is, you figure if he's gone for any length of time, and Jacob's been the one taking care of his flocks, Jacob knew how many there were. And the fact that he comes out, as he says, we'll do this day, and he comes out and Laban's already separated them out and took off to the hills with them.
He knew they were missing because
He
he
knew
knew
they
that
were-
flock better than Laban did.
Oh, you better believe he knew that the ones that were his were missing.
One thing I gotta keep reminding myself is God hadn't put any laws out or anything. I mean, basically it's just God talking at certain periods of time to, His
Mhm.
will to them. I mean, they didn't really understand God's will, I wouldn't think.
Not at this point.
Not just, so you gotta wonder, they're sort of in the dark, trying to figure out what it is, so they're shooting in the dark, so God's like you said, he's chose who he wants to succeed.
And also notice at this point in history, I'm not going to say that there haven't been any. We do know that there have been some. But the number of prophets that God raises up during that period of time was actually very limited. Enoch was the only prophet that we know of prior to the flood. And then after the flood, we have Abraham himself, and then Isaac and Jacob to some extent. But until,
Were any of the judges prophets?
yes.
Okay, so they didn't really have any more prophets until the judges arrived.
No, Moses was a
Moses,
prophet.
okay.
And Joshua would have been considered a prophet. But yeah, other than that, again, very limited. All right, well,
And very little in the way of written documentation about God that we know of. It would have been mostly oral tradition passed down.
mostly oral. And again, the what we call the Pentateuch, which Genesis through Deuteronomy, was written by Moses and in all probability dictated to him on Mount Sinai, which, people ask, well, how could Moses have known about all this history that happened then? Well, because God dictated it to him. Even if Moses wasn't there, God was. There is one prophetic voice that is actually mentioned in the Bible, and people have wondered, well, what happened to it? Jude actually refers to the prophet Enoch, who existed, of course, before the flood. And Jude mentions Enoch having prophesied that Christ would return with, and I'm quoting here, 10,000s, plural, of his holy ones. Well, there actually is a book of Enoch. If you Google it, some of you may have a copy of it or whatever. People say, well, why isn't this in the Bible? Because the actual prophecies of Enoch would not have survived the flood. The book of Enoch that you just go on Amazon and buy a copy of is not the actual book of Enoch, because otherwise, how would it have survived, the flood? You might say, well, Noah could have kept a copy. Highly, highly unlikely. And what we have now is the so-called book of Enoch. There's no evidence to indicate that it's actually that old, which is why the so-called book of Enoch has been just uniformly rejected by the church as being canonical.
Written after the flood by someone who wasn't Enoch.
Written after the flood by somebody who was not really Enoch, who just put Enoch's name on it. So Enoch was a prophet. He did apparently prophesy, but the only thing remaining of his prophetic voice is what Jude shared with us. And you might ask, well, how would Jude know? Because God told him, because Jude himself was a
Didn't he actually
prophetic.
prophesy God's judgment because he named his son Methuselah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did. All right. Well, it's getting close to 6 o'clock, and the next chapter is a whole nother section all on its own that I want to try to save for Sunday night. So questions this evening? All right, everybody go home and get your poplar trees and skin some of the bark off of it.
See what it does to my breeding attempts on cats?
Yeah.
I don't need to breed any more cats, thank you.
What's that, Larry?
You better not do that, you have more cats than shake a stick.
I already do. I'm up to 26 now.
Are they speckled and spotted?
Some of them. Some are pure.
Alright. Lou, would you lead us in prayer this evening?
Father, thank you for bringing us all together to listen to your word and to learn just how your will is always